Right, I've got a feeling this video is going to be a big one. I've got a few notes, few highlights, few things we're going to do with this beautiful thing here, the tactics board. We're going to do a little bit of myth busting first. We'll talk about general issues. I've got 3 football manager tactics to kind of fix the problems that Amorim is having. Now, the problem is not 3 at the back. So if you're one of those guys that says you can't play a 3 at the back system, you need to disappear, because that is not correct. We all know that teams around Europe, in particular, best example, Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen played a 3-4-3 with 2 10s and 2 6s. So it works. Glasner's now playing a 3-4-2-1. Conte's played a 3-4-3 over many times. Yeah, it works. It's down to similar things that are happening in games and our out of possession structure. That's the main thing that he isn't seem to be fixing, which is odd because he did it mid-game against Manchester City, his last game as sporting manager. He went from this sort of like 3-4-3 with the 2 10s and 2 6s. He ended up playing a 3-5-1-1 in the second half. So, yeah, little bit odd that he's not really changing things. However, the game against Manchester City at the weekend, all 3 goals were personnel problems. Super sloppy in the first 15. I was on holiday in Ibiza, and after about 15 minutes, roughly 3 or 4 minutes, I think, before Man City scored, I said to my little boy, we're in here. We've got a chance today. We're playing really well. We've been so sloppy in the transitions that I'll show you, and we had the chance to counter-attack and create good opportunities. Now, our XG for the game, as you can see, was really poor. We kind of kicked on later on and had some big chances in Buemo. I think there was Dog who had a chance, and there was a couple of others. But in the opening 15 minutes of the game, we should have had considerable XG numbers by just being better on the ball. And the 3 goals that we'll go through are all shocking mistakes. All right, let's get into it. 3 tactics will be available now for the Patreon, so thank you very much for your support. Let's go. General issues that we're going to talk about is the 3-4-3 and what potentially can happen. So we've got the Manchester United lineup, a general Manchester United lineup in red. And what happens is they end up playing in this 5-2-3 structure. Sometimes the wide players for the opponents can pin back the 2 wing backs, and then you're kind of left with that huge amount of space for your 2 central midfielders. Sometimes as well, if a fullback inverts, you've got a 4v2. At the very least, you've got a 3v2. There's also a personnel issue that we know. If we talk about Leverkusen, for example, they had Palacios in there and Granit Xhaka. Granit Xhaka, superb ball player, ball-winning player as well, can get about the park. Palacios as well, super athletic and getting about. And I do think that one of the major issues that is not down to maybe Amorim, or it could be if he really pushed it, was the signing of Sesko. And it probably wasn't the right move at the time. I can understand why they've done it. Newcastle had gone in. There's not many strikers around. They were maybe planning on getting him in a year's time. But then when Newcastle came calling, they thought we'll have to make our move now. And that probably pushed back what Manchester United were going to do. I don't think we were ever going to sign Baleba. I think that was nonsense. No way were they going to then sign Sesko, Cunha and Buemo and then spend another 112 million. What they should have done is not sign Sesko and sign Angelo Stiller from Stuttgart. Now, he's got a release clause of about 37 million euros next year. However, I do think bigger clubs will be sniffing about. If Man United have prioritised him, he can play as a 6. That's 6/8. Decent off the ball, but tremendous progressive passer. Would have been brilliant in there with Agate. Better than Menu right now. Fernandes could have moved up. That would have been a simple fix. However, we've not been dealt with that, and we're left with this issue here, with that big box in there that we're going to solve today. Now, we've got 3 ways round it, 3 ways that he needs to tweak, either in possession and out of possession. So talking about other teams, and in particular, people are mentioning, Crystal Palace is a perfect example where you'd say potentially the quality of player is not great, but what they're doing right now is playing the 3-4-2-1 version better. Now, they play the 2 10s. As you can see from the screen here, the 2 10s are remarkably deep and remarkably compact. This is the issue. Man United are kind of pressing in this 5-2-3, whereas Crystal Palace are kind of pressing and playing out of possession in what would be generally a 5-4-1. So you've got Pino there, who's sort of like the right, the Mbuemo kind of side. You've got your 2 sitters. There's your Agate, there's your Fernandes, and you've got Kamada there, with obviously Sesko being Mateta. So number 1, remarkably compact. Now, Manchester United were actually not really compact, but there was an element of compactness against Manchester City. However, it wasn't done to to this level. Into the next one as well, how they press and what they do with their wing-backs. As you can see right here, Munoz is the right wing-back. He's exceptionally high. We didn't have this at the weekend. This was normally down to Mbeumo kind of doing. And what they have is a trigger press. So the Sunderland centre-half is on the ball, as you can see. When he plays that ball into the full-back, that is going to be the trigger for the press. So the ball's gone in, look. Munoz is now pressing. And as the ball's gone back to the centre-half, that is now Pino, who's come out to press the centre-half. So very basic pressing triggers. Look, we've still got, right there, you've got Will Hughes quite high. You've got Mateta, though. Interestingly, Mateta is shielding the holding midfielder. That is Granit Xhaka. Sesko didn't do that against Manchester City at the weekend. Sesko was sort of like in this area here, splitting the two centre-halves. So the pressing structures are different. And also the last one as well, the right centre-half in Richards, being really aggressive. So from that clip there, where the ball's then, this left centre-half's decided to go along with it. He's gone into the channel. But what we've got is, that's our Lenny Yoro. And he's, at the moment, not really keen on coming in and marking and dropping in that deep. The difference between the two at the moment, just based off those clips, is Palace is such more structured, more compact, and that is down to Amorim himself. Nothing really to do with the players. However, getting into the Manchester City game, immediately I thought Manchester United actually really started the game really well. I will leave a link down in the description. It's really difficult. I haven't got Y-Scout at the moment. I'm hoping to get it for FM26 so I can really do much more clear detail in terms of the analysis and maybe not just tracking the big games. I'm kind of relying on clips and highlights. And luckily, shout out to Ollie, who suggested I check out the United fan channel, basically, on Twitter, who posted the full match highlights. So if you want to watch the opening 15 minutes up until the Manchester City scored, I will leave a link down in the description so you can check that out. But basically, as you can see, the pressing structure is a bit different between the three. So we've got a very, rather than it being that 5-4-1, we've got a very clear 5-2-3. So a little bit higher. You can see Sesko's half shadowing maybe Rodri, but it was generally down to Fernandes, as you can see. Fernandes is a lot higher. It was down to Fernandes. Now, one simple fix could have been Sesko cover shadowing and Fernandes going in there and setting it up like that and still leaving Diallo and Mbeumo quite high. That could have been a fix. This as well is absolutely balmy. So Bruno has been tasked with pushing on to Rodri early on in the game. It was he spoke about it actually in the post-match interview, pressing on. But then as the ball's gone back to Donnarumma, he's then pressed again. And look, we actually get quite lucky, but that is that amount of people pressing when your number 6 as well has gone ahead of the striker is going to leave 9 times out of 10. Now, you might be able to say actually that because it's Donnarumma, he's not going to be able to pick a pass out. If Rodri was, let's for argument's sake, goes into there, could he then pick out a little pass? Could he dink it in? Could he dink it into the left back? But Man United actually recover the ball. And this is one of the highlights where it's like they had multiple opportunities. They've won the ball extremely high up the pitch. That ball's going into Mazraoui. Fast forward 9 seconds and they're linked with this. With a 2v2 with the ball breaking. So that ball's going into hard and look at that. That was because the delivery from Mazraoui, not a great cross, right back playing at right wing back. Would have been nice to have Diallo out there and been a little bit braver. But within 9 seconds, we're then broke on with pretty much a 6v5. So really disappointing that we got into good areas like here, 5 minutes and 42. We've won the ball. I think the ball was played into the Ligt and he did a rush pass, a good rush pass, but rushed it into Yellow. And right here, look at him here. That ball needs to come out here. Or, even better, just take it yourself. That, behind him, is Rodri, right there. Rodri played like he had a caravan on his back. I thought he was really slow, got caught in possession, which we'll talk about. Obviously, pretty much a year to the day since he was out injured. So, he's been in and out, I think a little bit, but generally not really played that much and just starting to get back. And, he's not going to catch Diallo. Why couldn't Diallo, run with it? Instead, look, if he's going to pick that pass out, no problem. But he didn't. It ended up going out for a throw. Once again, 7 minutes and 20 into the game. Diallo robs Rodri. Sesko breaks forward. Look at that. That is an easy pass for me. He's going to get the better of him in there, Bueno, you would say, just with the body shape. I can't think of his name, the young left back. Just with his body shape, been a little bit side on, and Buemo's in full stride, look, by the looks of it. But once again, holds on for it too long. Ball breaks down. It's a really poor pass from Sesko. So they had chances early on, and the XG, yes, was low, but that is down to quality on the pitch. And then again, 8 minutes in, so just like, a minute later, another opportunity. You would think he could easily cut in. He's got the space to do it here. He's got a little bit of space. Can he then just cut in onto his left foot and slip that ball in? I don't think, from this area here, that's a hard pass with all that space. In the end, he holds on for it too long, ends up running through the goalkeeper. That should have been touch on his left, slip him in. Or if you're really good, with the outside left foot. So they had chances. That's just the first 8 minutes of the game. And then after that, this is the start of the first goal. So we talk about that two-man midfield, and I get really bored with it a little bit. People like Gary Neville talk about it a lot, and it was the main focus. That was not really the reason why we lost. I didn't think Manchester City were actually that good during the game, in particular in the first half. I think game state played in where it became really comfortable in the second half. But, we're quite compact here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're not bad. It's a nice-ish 5-4-1. We're not as open. We haven't got, the two wingers. The two tens have tucked in alongside the midfielders. However, there's some glaring problems. Now, we know that Doku ends up getting on and scoring. And people say, well, they get round the pockets, they get round them outsides of the 260s. But look at Fernandes. Fernandes' body position. Where he is, there's absolutely no need for him to be here. And also, we've got maybe Dorgu has got an eye on Bernardo Silva, but he's out wide. All it needed was a simple switching of players across. So, in particular, Mazraoui on this right-hand side. Could he have not tucked across a little bit? So they all tucked across, so then De Ligt could have covered that space. Yoro could have got in front of Haaland, Mazraoui coming behind. Mbeumo can track any movement from the left fullback. And then Luke Shaw going and engage there. Luke Shaw's quite clever in terms of fouling. He often makes sure he didn't do what Yoro does for the second goal where he gets turned and doesn't foul him. He would go in there and foul him. Allow Dorgo to go in there, and then if Rodri wants to play that ball out wide, then so be it. It's Silva. We should be then able, by the time the ball goes across, it's also gone out wide as well. He's not gone through the middle of the pitch. And also Bruno Fernandes. Just get in there. Just get in there. Those simple things could have all been... Now, maybe the back line, potentially you could say is maybe an Amorim thing, but there's no reason for Mazraoui to be stood out there. They've got no real danger on that left-hand side. And Buemo's doing a good job. And if that all would have come in, that ball would have come in, Shaw would have probably dealt with it a little bit better. And yeah, from there on, it was disappointing. Luke Shaw gets into awful body position. Don't even talk to me about this guy, Ugarte. If we look at these angles, look, so there's Shaw, awful body position, but he's not, he's given up there. He gives up half an attempt, twice half an attempt to stop the cross coming in, and they score. And then the second goal itself, once again, really annoying play. They've actually gone into a 4-4-2 a little bit, which we're going to talk about. So Lenny Yoro as the right back, De Ligt, Shaw, and then Dorgu. So you've got back four with a little bit of a four-man midfield. Now, ideally, I would prefer Diallo to be in here and be a little bit flatter. And then it would be Sesko and Mbeumo as the front two. And as play develops, like Maz, he's in a little bit of no man's land here. Yoro's got Doku. He can do 1v1 with him in terms of pace-wise, no problem. But he's too late to the party. He comes in, the ball is nutmegged through Ugarte's legs, who presses the ball, and then it goes through to Foden, pops it off before Maz gets closer. Yoro's then in an awful body position. That's exactly where, you don't mind getting rolled on the outer side. So if he gets rolled, he can go around there, but you definitely don't get rolled. So then they can come on the inside. De Ligt, you were probably given the task of being the man to get closer to Haaland. And he's just ball watching. And I feel a little bit sorry for Luke Shaw. So here he's on his heels. Luke Shaw's tracking it, but Luke Shaw's not got the physicality or the speed to keep up with him. Whereas De Ligt has. Soon as he goes in there, De Ligt, for me, should be just coming across a little bit. Just in case Lenny Yoro doesn't deal with it and Doku wants to go on a run. If Doku wants to go on a run now, he's got all that space. He's got all of that space to run into. So I don't know why De Ligt didn't come across. He got kind of caught half and half, and then by the time ball's played in, as you can see, he's now then going around the outside of Shaw to try and cover Luke Shaw's run, and Luke Shaw's just not quick enough. Not quick enough, not strong enough. I did feel a little bit sorry for Luke Shaw in that instance. He's had a stinker for the first, yes. I think the second one's, someone said, why didn't he make a tackle? But he didn't really ever get close enough to make a good tackle. He just brought him down. And then it was a really good finish. And at the same time as well, you know, the goalkeeper, I think the ball was ended up about in there, somewhere in there, the ball was hit from. Goalkeepers like to stay on the line, you know, starting position. He's basically on his line. Look, needs to be a lot higher. And then the third goal's a shambles. Luke Shaw at fault partially again, or major at fault. As the ball's played in, you could see midfielder, I think it's Bernardo Silva, already ready to pounce on Luke Shaw. Now Luke Shaw comes in, gets the ball, decides to drift inside. Not the right option. It was a slow pass as well from Agate, but that ball should have then just been popped back here to Maguire. It wasn't, and then all carnage broke loose. Maguire had to step in, made a kind of half pass, half tackle, and then we were in trouble. And then, you know, it could have got worse with this here. This is where the movement of Reinders ended up going 1v1. Once again, if we bring it to where we had possession, Luke Shaw looking, like, look at Bruno's positioning here. I think it's really poor. He's a little bit high, which means, you know, he's not got the pace of, well, he probably has got the pace of Ruben Dias, but he's not going to want to really get into a 1v1 with him. All he had to do was just move into this area here, and Luke Shaw would have a simple pass. Because at the moment, he's kind of getting covered a little bit there by, who's that, maybe Rodri, or it might be Gonzalez now, who's come on. In the end, he did absolutely nothing. We end up in this scenario where he loses the ball. I think the tries and plays the ball out wide. We get caught. And then it's Agate's fault again. Look here. He's watching the play. He knows Maguire's waiting for Haaland. You can see the body movement of Reinders and how he's going to move. But instead he goes to the ball and allows Reinders to be free. Sometimes I call that lazy because that's a lot harder to track a Reinders who's on the run. And he's through. Should have scored. Or should at least squared it, maybe potentially to Doku. So those were three instances that from the goal. That instance there, that could have been 4. And then the 3 or 4 chances Man United had at 0-0, which they didn't capitalise on. So it's not all Ruben Amorim. He's a massive part of it, yes. But then when you set up like this in big games, you need to be absolutely on it. And I do think the Crystal Palace way of pressing in this game would have been better than how we set them up. But in the instances where the goal scored, I think Manchester City, apart from that, didn't have a massive deal. I don't think they did. I think they created maybe about 2.5 XG. I think Haaland had a chance early on, but they weren't absolutely bad. I think how the game worked, Man United had got ahead, would have been maybe potentially a whole different game. Maybe they would have compacted themselves a little bit more, like Crystal Palace do with Mbeumo and Diallo coming back in, but we will never know, will we? So now we're going to dive into Football Manager. I've got 3 ways of kind of fixing the out of possession and a little bit of the in possession stuff as well. Couple of tactical tweaks, just little tweaks. Now the big one is this one here. All right. So this is how we set up and what they could actually do and what they actually did at times. I think even against Arsenal in the first game of the season where they actually played out of possession in a 4-4-2. So Lenny Yoro would be more than comfortable coming and playing in the right back area with Dorgu going in. And then just having one of the 10s who would be at the moment in Cunha. If you go with the Diallo, if you go with the Diallo as a wing back, if you went with Dalot as a wing back, you could flip it and have Cunha in there, Dorgu in there, Shaw as the left back, like that, with Dalot and then Mbeumo coming in. Do you see the pattern? But what you could do is really have a good out of possession. Arsenal, generally last season, I haven't watched too much of their out of possession stuff this season, but over the last 2 years of defending in a 4-4-2. Now, how do we put that into Football Manager? Because it's only the out of possession. In possession, we want to see Dorgu high, Diallo wide. We want to see Mbeumo in there, Sesko in there, Cunha in there, Fernandes in there with Agate playing that kind of 3-2-5 or 3-1-5, 3-1-6 or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, how do we get that in the game? We do it by setting up like this. So Football Manager, now you will say that that is not a 3 at the back tactic. However, teams change, as I've said, between in and out of possession. Arsenal press in a 4-4-2, but generally play a 4-3-3. Lots of teams like to, regardless of their tactic system. Leverkusen as well at times did go, under Xabi Alonso did go into a 4-4-2 as well, with Frimpong playing a little bit higher on that right-hand side. And it's kind of similar in terms of Diallo. So this is how it would line up with this offset 4-4-2. I'm going to show you a couple of highlights now just to show you how it works. So as you can see from the heat map that I'm going to put up now right on screen, you can see how the team looked. Doesn't look like a 4-4-2, does it? So that's pretty good that we've managed to get that. Now, remember, the tactic screen itself is based on your out of possession. So this screen right here is how the team sets up out of possession. Everything else, team instructions for in possession, player roles, duties, player instructions will then dictate how the team moves in possession. All right, so that's how we've managed to get a 4-4-2 looking like a 3-2-5, a 3-4-2-1. So I'll show you this from the kickoff. So we've got our two strikers, a little bit on top of each other to start. That's an FM thing. We've got our four midfielder, 1, 2, 3, 4. Our 4 at the back. So we've got a little bit of a 4-4-2 or with Mbeumo's positioning, which we'll have to do at times depending on how teams set up. In particular, if they drift a left back in, a full back to play inverted, Mbeumo would come in that quite narrow anyway. But when we win it, Cunha wins it, and we pass, and within a few seconds, we've now got our back three. Yoro, De Ligt, Martinez, which he likes to keep well structured. Dorgu's going to hit the left. Ahmad's come off the right, look, with Mbeumo. There we go. Little movement. How often have we seen that movement between Mbeumo and Ahmad down that side? We should have actually scored really early on in those first 30 seconds. So that's a very easy way of kind of sorting it, and a very easy way for Manchester to do it. There's no reason why they couldn't do that. So we're going to go through the tactic now. So Bayendia, sweeper keeper on defend. Lenny Yoro, I've got him as an inverted fullback on defend, with De Ligt as a cover defender because we want him to be that sort of like that anchor. I don't need him to do this kind of libero stepping into midfield for the first phase. Not really necessary, I don't think. I don't think the rewards outweigh it, and his profile, he can do it. De Ligt has done quite well over the last sort of like under the Amorim period, but it's not needed. So we're going to play him as a central defender on cover. Martinez, ball playing defender on stopper, because we know he's going to go in, dribble more, stay wider. Super important, Man United getting back fit. Left hand side, left full back. No play instructions, but a complete wing back on attack for him. Garte, ball in midfield on defend. Fernandez, I've swapped between the two because he does get quite high. I think in terms of bigger games, you might just want to drop that onto a DLP. But, you know, we know Fernandez, if he's going to play as that 6, he's going to drift. He's going to want to drift forward. So I think the roaming playmaker kind of suits. Defensive winger on the right-hand side for Diallo. But with the player instruction of cut inside with the ball, because you know he's going to want to go onto the left foot. He likes to come in here and then reverse that little pass into Mbeumo, who's going to be out wide. Left-hand side, Cunha, inverted winger on attack. I've absolutely loved him in this role. But you could also do support player instruction as well, roam from position. We'll get that overlapping down from the Dorgu. And then the front two, we've offset it a little bit, just so we could get Cunha coming in here, Mbeumo being a little bit wider. That is set up for our in possession stuff as well, just to make it to make sure Mbeumo's just not playing straight down the middle. So we've got Mbeumo as a pressing forward on support, stay wider, roam from position, and then Sesko, bog standard, advanced forward. Instructions, attacking mentality. I think that's important for how Man United have been playing, quite wasteful in possession, but want to be direct, want to play, so that helps. Passing to space, play out defence, fairly wide. Standard passing, because not overly reliant on keeping it short and simple. Higher tempo, be more expressive. In transition, they want to counter press when they can. They want to counter, and we can distribute to centre halves. And then out of possession, just much high line, high press, get up the pitch. Obviously, we want to dominate games, but we're not been able to do that yet. If you lined up like this, potentially, we might be able to do it. Okay, so that is scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 would be something like this. So this is more of a 5-4-1. Obviously, we don't want him in there. Let's just do a couple of little changes. Maybe a Dalot comes in and we defend in that 5-4-1 that we've spoke about. Now, we can't do it as well as what Crystal Palace do. I think there really needs to be an out for FM26, some more out of possession stuff where we get your wingers tucking in as narrow as possible. So like out of possession, they're in here, and then in possession, they're in here. And at the moment, we can't do it with FM24. We can try, but I think how you said is of like, if we set up like that, we're going to get that 5-4-1 out of possession. But then how does that work in the game? We've not done a lot. All I've done is add an overlapping. So we're not changing Amorim's principles here. We've kept pretty much our line the same. We've just asked our defenders to step up more, just so we don't kind of sit in that 5 all the time. And we're going to ask Dorgu to be really aggressive because he's starting as a left back rather than a left wing back, to be super aggressive at getting forward. We've just beaten West Ham, playing the system. Deserved 16 shots, 2.68 XG, got a man sent off later on, we did. But with what would be seen as a negative system, a 5-4-1, we actually did really well. So this is this scenario we've got here. With Martinez in particular and Cunha. Look at the narrowness of Cunha. We've got Dorgu, that's left back, not left wing back, that's left back. We've got Mbeumo inside. We've got Bruno trying to float between the lines a little bit. And we just progressed the ball really nicely. This is what we need. That Luke Shaw can do it. We didn't get the opportunity to do it. I think Manchester City maybe pressed him really well at the weekend. But Martinez doing this. Look at Cunha's positioning. Cunha's in. Should score. But nonetheless, really good high positions from Dorgu. The player, even though he's at left back, the player instruction that he's got, the player role, complete wing back on attack, he's going to get further forward. I just thought that was a really nice movement to see. That's what you want your centre-halves to do in possession. I think Man United ones aren't doing it as much at the moment. They're not really engaging a lot at times. We need them to be more aggressive in possession. I think going back to a back 3 rather than that 2 and then that Delict one. If we just went to a flat back 3, Palace do it really well. Gay steps in, Richard steps in, and then sort of like wide centre back roles, and then drive with the ball. And we've got that dribble more on instruction, remember, on for Lisandro Martinez as well. But what it does give you the tactic is a little bit of compactness. So as you can see, Sesko up there all by himself. Now, I think that's fine because he can do a little bit of everything. He can hold it up, he can drive, he's got pace, power. So him being isolated up there, I don't think is an issue. Obviously, a long ball, if that ball drops into Fernandes, that's a ball straight into the channel and it for Sesko to chase. But look at the compactness. I think, Cunha's kind of cheating a little bit and Fernandes, they're not great. Maybe Fernandes could be a little bit deeper. That's only Wan-Bissaka, but look at the others, all in that little area there in between, not nearly in the width of the 6-yard box. So super compact, defensively really strong, playing with the 5-4-1 in Football Manager. And the only thing we've changed here is Mbeumo out there as an inverted fullback, inverted winger. He's going to cut in. Cunha the same. Maybe even put Cunha on a support, but he was absolutely awesome in this game. But potentially could do that. Fernandes a DLP rather than a roaming playmaker. Little change in the back as well. Complete wing back Dorgu. Wing back on support for Dalot. And then Martinez Delict the same as the previous tactic, with Yoro being a wide centre-back on defence, and then he steps into that wide defending role. So that is the second one, the Amorim 5-4-1. The last one is the biggest tweak out of the lot. It looks a little bit like this, where, unfortunately, it means one of the players will step out. So we're going to take out Matheus Cunha, and we're going to put in, let's get Amad Diallo back in as well. We're going to put in Menu, because everyone's talking about it. He needs to play more, and this would give Manchester United a better structure in terms of the middle. Now, the only thing that it needs to work is when you do this and you play with the middle 3, some teams like to bring the centre midfielders out to press the fullbacks. I always think the best way, and I love to watch Atalanta do it under Gasperini, was to get your wing backs to be really aggressive and really high in terms of pressing the fullbacks. So the middle 3, the middle 2 stay really narrow. The middle 3 midfielders, they pick up the 3 midfielders for, the opponents in 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. You've got Mbeumo as well, who you could maybe sit off and maybe be a little bit of a shadow striker if you wanted to potentially maybe man mark a 6, or if a fullback's coming in and inverting, you could do that. So that's how I've set them up in this scenario here. We've just beaten Spurs with the tactic. The only annoying thing is, you need to mark specific position. So what you were doing is, I've set it up as a right back, but if it was the game now, we would be marking whoever's playing fullback. So for the Tottenham game, it was Porro and Udogie. So Dorgu marked Porro and Diallo marked Udogie, just so then when they got the ball, they would go and press. And what I would do is on the player instructions as well, which is super important, is that I would get them to tight mark as well. So get your 2 players to tight mark. Let's just say that obviously we're playing Sheffield Wednesday now in the cup, but let's just say the right back here was Porro. I would do tight marking on him and then find the left full back, tight marking on him. So then you hope the game triggers those presses from your 2 wing backs onto the 2 full backs as much as possible. So this is the little tweak that we've done. We've just battered Spurs. Altai, same again. Back 3 not changed. We've just moved Dorgu up and we've moved the wing back from support to attack. We've brought Ugarte down. We've played now Fernandez as a simple AP with Menu, dribble more but as a Mazzala. Roam from position and stay wider for Mbeumo just so he gets into that wide right half space a little bit. And then Sesko stay wider. So we're playing with split strikers a little bit now and allow the 2 midfielders to move into. And then what you've got is players like Cunha that can come on for one of the 2. We're kind of, unless we, without playing Xerxes too much, we've got a little bit of an option in there to tweak it. And it's actually worked really well. We played Tottenham Hotspur. Absolutely battered them 4-0. With Ahmad as well, on the player instruction for Ahmad being to cut inside with the ball. He sees out here as a 16. This is just Ahmad all over in it. Skinning on that left-hand side, getting in, should have scored. Good save from Vicario. So one thing that you need to put into the tactic, dribble more, cut inside, and that mark-specific position. That's something that I forgot to mention for the dribble more and cut inside, just so we get Diallo doing the thing that Diallo is really good at. Now, some people will say, why don't you just play Dorgu and Diallo as wing-backs to kind of counteract that? The only problem, and when I did the Gasperini video a long time ago, as I really dived into the mechanics of sort of like the winger, defensive winger slash complete wing-back, is that they never really go in to make a back 5 or a back 4. So if you imagine it as if Diallo goes and presses, Yoro would come round, Dorgu would come in to make a back 4. We don't get that if you play with the defensive wingers. So I find this the best solution for it. And the flip side of that is that you think maybe, well, because they're playing as wing backs, they're not going to get as high. But that's definitely not the case, as you can see. Ball's been thrown back from Martinez from a throw-in. Or was it a free kick maybe? Bayende super high. We've got our back 3. Look, we've got our 5 across. That's just what we want in Dorgu, Ahmad, in Mbeumo. There's someone in there in Sesko. Fernandez rotating in the midfield with Menu. So you've got your 3-1-6 or your 3-2-5, depending on what the role of Fernandez and Menu do at times. But look, Ahmad's in. We've managed to, if I bring it back, circulate the ball. Ahmad staying wide, waiting for it. Nice movement through the middle. Mbeumo coming in that you'd expect him to do, releasing Ahmad. We've seen that a few times. We saw it a fair bit in the Arsenal game as well. Him coming inside and allowing Diallo to go around. So just little things. Look, it can be done. All 3 tactics are available for the Patreons. I've covered everything that you need to kind of know to copy the tactics across. Nothing really changed with the team instructions. Said, just go back, pause it. If you don't want to be a Patreon, just pause it and copy them in yourself. But I'd really appreciate it if you check out the Patreon. Ready for FM26. Got some super ideas coming. Hopefully there's going to be a big tactical change with, looks like, a lot of new different player roles and things. So yeah, and out of possession player roles, which has been rumoured on the forums and stuff. So we'll hopefully find out more about that in the next couple of weeks. Let me know what you think to the tactics, the suggestions. Yeah, give me your thoughts down below. Take care. See you later.